Hey guys, welcome back. Happy Friday. It is March 14th. It's 1 o'clock here in Detroit, and this is the last word presented by Chrisman Commentary. Christy, Courtney, hey guys.
Howdy.
Hey, happy Friday.
I mean,
Go
happy
green.
almost St. Patrick's Day.
Right there. You're right on the doorstep of St. Patty's, no doubt.
And Brian is dressed for it.
I know.
Already
Everyone is green.
my Spartan green. My team is playing right now, so it's halftime. I won't be distracted for another 10 or 15 minutes until the game starts again, and then I'll be duly distracted. But there's a lot going on, guys. It's been kind of a pretty wild week that started hot and heavy right away Monday. KP is getting his last run while we're doing the last word. So he's got his kids in Park City and is getting some last ski sessions out of the way here. So he won't be joining us today.
Well, I hope he got a little more snow. The other day when I saw it posted on his stories, there was a definitive lack of snow.
No doubt, no question. So I mean, there's a pretty big piece of news that came out Monday morning. But before we go there, I just thought I'd lob it to each of you. Is there, like, as we look at the week that was, outside of the Rocket Redfin that we're going to talk about in a minute, what's kind of come your way that's interesting here this week? Start with you,
Christy.
I say recently posted is MBA numbers that 61% of firms surveyed turned a profit in Q4, down from 71%. And then on average, IMBs lost $40 alone in Q4, down from a $701 profit in Q3.
And how do you feel about that?
Well, I think there are a lot of reasons for that. I think it's actually going to get worse in Q1 2025 as we think about the level of competition, the way that things have changed in the regulatory environment, or at least a perception of changes in the regulatory environment. I know we've talked about that a number of times, but it really is, we're seeing production expenses rise for many of the players. We're seeing some shifts in the government market. Like there's a lot going on right now.
There's a lot going on right now. I couldn't agree more. I think this week for me, Brian, it's pretty personal, but I think it's pretty relevant to this group and Chrisman's group. So for anybody who doesn't know me, I am not the sales gurus and the juggernauts of the financial markets like my colleagues here. I'm just a servicing girl from West Michigan. And I continue to get schooled over and over and over and over again by this concept of the salesperson's perspective, right? And the motivations of the salesperson, particularly at CMG, because Chris George is such a huge proponent of the loan officer, which I think is super relevant to the other news that we heard this week, and we can talk about that a little bit. But there's, at the risk of sounding too woo-woo for 2025 and our current administration, there's so much forced empathy in my role here at CMG to put myself in the shoes of a salesperson, because ultimately we do what Chris would do at the end of the day. It's kind of like Jesus, but without the God complex, right? And it's like it again and again and again. I'm like, I never saw it that way. And there are salespeople that comment on some of the stuff that I throw out on LinkedIn, and I'm like, I never saw it that way. And so for me, I'm just grateful for opportunities like this to learn from folks like you guys. And I think that there is some value in this dialogue of making these two sides where on the outside of the business, it's perceived like this is one company servicing and loan originations, right? And on the inside, that honestly couldn't be further from the truth in every organization that I've seen. And so I just appreciate being here and the learning from you fine folks, honestly.
Wait, Courtney, I feel the same way, right? It is a piece of the business that is critical to the operations and to the life cycle of the loan, and to really, quite honestly, to the health of the originator, particularly in the environment and the things that we're going to talk about today. You think about your servicing book, it really matters. And being able to learn from you and tie this all together, I think is really critical for everyone right now, particularly me. Like I won't talk about everybody else. I'll just talk about me. I need to beef up on my servicing knowledge always.
Yeah.
So,
it's
Courtney, I love the perspective and knowing what I know about CMG and in particular its founder, and the history of Chris and the team and where he's brought the company and what he built it from. And then I look at my 30 plus. I'm at the stage now where it's 30 plus. I'm not going to name the specific years, but 30 plus years.
nice.
In the mortgage industry, all of it, like literally 100% of it on the revenue production side.
Yeah.
And my perspective on salespeople, loan advisors, loan officers, loan originators, you've got all these different names for them, right? My perspective of loan officers has changed by institution I was in, company to company, right?
Same.
And today, not being part of a mortgage company, but serving mortgage companies, and then by extension, the entire ecosystem of loan originators, especially in this environment, it's never been more true that nothing happens until we create revenue. And
isn't that funny? It's the same thing in technology, Brian. It is such a good point. I don't say 30 plus years. I say a little bit less than that. But when I do say a little bit less than that, my spin on the vendor side in technology taught me more about money and the business cases and the needs, right? From that perspective. And there in each of these pockets, you have to follow the money, also potentially apropos to the big news of this week.
Yeah. I mean, and I think this all ties together, right? So Monday morning, we all kind of woke up to the news out of Detroit that Rocket was acquiring Redfin. And so it was pretty interesting to watch the reaction on LinkedIn in particular, right? Yeah. And it was quite
your popcorn moment.
Exactly. So I'll give my immediate reaction. Like the minute I saw it, right, was chess over checkers. Some in the industry are playing chess, while a lot of other people are playing checkers. And this was one of those, Dan Gilbert and his organization have had many moments like this, over the years. And this was another one of those where, I think we're going to look back on this event at some point, probably not too far down the road, and really label it as another sea-changing moment for our industry. And I don't say that to put fear in anybody, other than to say there's never been more focus on the importance of getting up funnel and engaged with consumers earlier in their financial life as it relates to home ownership. And so I think it's a good message for the industry as a whole, and a really good message for local loan officers. If you peel back the onion and you kind of look at what's really going on, it's, Rocket is said publicly that, the purchase, they're focused on being better in purchase, right? And one of those strategies has been to get local. And so they've been recruiting and adding local loan officers, but they've also leaned into their channel that's very hyper local, which is their TPO channel. So there's a lot there.
It's kind of like a mic drop moment there, Brian. Like there's, you can speculate, and there was certainly a lot of that on LinkedIn this week regarding this announcement with what does it mean and what they're going to do. Obviously, there's some really smart people over at Rocket that have been in the business a long time. And, they've recently acquired some new talent that's over there. So they probably have a pretty good plan in place. Now, whether or not it works, right? It's probably well thought out, well capitalized. Like let's give them credit for that. none of us know when we create a plan, we have a lot of confidence in it, but how the market's going to react, how the psychology of the consumer is going to be, and what's going to happen. And so I would tell you that if you're sitting back and you're leading an organization, or you're leading a team within an organization as an originator, because many originators really run businesses within businesses. If that's who you are, then I wouldn't say just shake up your entire strategy. Let it be a data point that you consider, and understand that not everybody's going to go to the same model. When you think about tax preparers, some people go to H&R Block, and some people do TurboTax, and some people go to CPAs, and there's lots of models in between, right? So there's going to be an opportunity for many, many models to coexist in this space, because not every consumer wants the same thing. So again, use this as a data point. Think about how it's going to change. I see the halftime is now over, and we're moving on. So
refreshing my screen.
Okay. So, but this is a data point that informs your decision. So maybe it means that you don't have the opportunity to buy a Redfin or anything like that. But what does it look like to create a newer, different partnership with your local real estate agents? There is this hyper local need that happens. So how do you create dialogue with your agents because of this? Because they are probably looking at it the same way and saying, hey, what does this mean for us? And how is this going to work in the future? So help draft that narrative. Be a listening ear. Be somebody that holds space for that conversation, and use that information to help you figure out how you react in your local marketplace.
I think also it's a good, I love it. I love that, Christy. The thing that I love the most about it, it's a real kick in the ass to, what is your strategy, right? What are you doing, and who are you targeting in the market? Because I think that, working smarter, and Rocket's huge. Rocket's been huge for years. They've been in the top of the whatever. They should be doing huge things. We should expect them to, if they're not doing huge things, they're not being the Rocket, or the Quicken, as I remember in the olden days, right? And so we should expect them to be doing that. I do think that there's a place in the market for all sorts of people. And Brian, I'd be really interested in your perspective, specifically with regard to consumers and your experience at FinLocker. But, when I think about it, I think about the people that are first-time home buyers. I think about the people that don't understand the marketplace or don't have the financial sophistication that a lot of people do. A person like me, I might be interested in the Rocket model because I know enough that I'm not going to get too screwed in an no advisor environment or stuff like that. But, a lot of people know enough to know what they don't know, or they don't know anything at all, but they'd still like a home. And I don't know if it serves that market well. I know for sure it will call that market until that market wants to cry because their phone won't stop calling. But I don't know if it serves this next generation of homeowner, particularly because they're too busy working right now to get enough money for a down payment so that they can afford anything in the first place. Do you have thoughts in that group of consumers? I know you've been talking a lot actually recently in the space about the new homeowner.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're spot on. This is ultimately it's a cohort of home buyers that are going to naturally kind of gravitate to this, highly digital experience that starts with search and then kind of seamlessly connects all the way through. But there's still always going to be a need for home ownership advisors, not just loan officers that are there when a transaction's ready. Because if that's all you're doing, if your existence is to be able to handle a transaction when somebody refers somebody to you, when they've already made the decision to buy their home, which means they've probably already done a lot of the emotional and financial preparation that leads up to that. Those are the loan officers that I would be worried about having an existence, 5-10 years from now. If you're truly in the home ownership advisory realm where you're part of the education process, building trust early, that never goes away. And I think that's really that's the sweet spot, I think, going forward with the current and next generation first-time home buyers, especially.
Brian, it's always been true. and it just looks different. So
Yeah.
I think about buying my first house, and this will definitely show my age a little bit. But in my first house, we had these MLS books, and agents got a new book every week, and that was the only way to get information. And and it said on the book, under penalty of law and fines and death, you couldn't give that book to somebody who was not a realtor. But if you had a really good relationship with your agent, they might give you last week's book. And you could have that to drive around and look at houses and kind of get an idea. The home buying process, from the time you start dreaming about it till the time you're a ready, willing, able, hot buyer, going to transact in the next, 30, 60, 90 days, has historically taken 3, 6, 9, 12 months, depending on, life circumstances for why you're thinking about it. And that hasn't changed the entire time I've been in the industry. What it looked like when I started out in the industry and I bought my first house was I built a relationship with the agent because I needed to get real estate data from them. And there was not a lot of pushiness there. There was a lot of education. And that relationship was built with the agent, and I was really stuck to them. And you saw this with so many buyers. That's why the agent controlled where they went for their loan, because there was just that foundation of trust that had been built over time. And you're starting to see now that the MLS data is more democratized, that you have the Redfins and the Zillows and the Trulias and the, millions of other ways they can access this data, that the relationship has worked a little different. FinLocker has stepped in and others to help facilitate that relationship. But you are seeing, if you look at Strathmore's data and the PGR data, you are seeing that consumers are saying, hey, I only go with who my real estate agent recommended, or they were the reason that I went with this person, about 30% of the time. And so there's been a little disintermediation in that relationship, and it's starting to look different. It's starting to look like, what are you doing to educate the consumer around their finances? Why did Rocket and others look at having a money app? Why is FinLocker so successful with what they're doing? You've got to figure out how to build that relationship long term, and you've got to start making some of those small pivots. It's why the servicing piece is so important, because if you can maintain contact with that, in our case, member, in other cases, borrowers or customers, if you maintain that contact, then you're more likely to get that deal back the next time. And we know that most people buy more than one house in their lifetime. They use mortgage services for refinances, for other reasons. So that constant contact is highly valuable. And we have to be partnering with groups that are tech companies that do this. We have to be partnering with our servicing team. We have to think about how we partner differently with agents, because they are still the biggest referral source. At 30%, that's still where the bulk of the consumers are getting their information from.
Yeah, I think that the to pull the servicing piece through, but a question that I'm asked a lot is, what's the biggest bang for your buck in servicing, particularly in servicing technology, right? And no, I'm not going to go too soapboxy in servicing technology land, but I will say this. If you're not investing in your digital environment to make things easier, to bring that democratized data to your consumer through good tools, whether you're building them in-house or whether you source them from other places, you're barking up the wrong tree. And the legacy technology systems, right? They benefit from us continuing to run around them and try to organize around them. They benefit from the fragmentation because it increases the need from them. You're not going to get those solutions, at those companies that are still using 60-year-old mainframes. You're just not. You have to look at good solutions, whether it is FinLocker, wink, wink, Brian, or Rocket. One of the reasons why Rocket servicing is so good and Mr. Cooper servicing is often noted as better than the rest of the marketplace from the consumer perspective is that they start in the digital environment when they have an inside problem. Instead of just making it efficient in the process in the back office, right? They actually have a presence in the marketplace. They own their brand in the marketplace. And more servicing shops need to do that. We need to invest in meeting the consumer where they are in the digital environment, right? And so, I sat in a room of very, very smart men in mortgage servicing last fall, and there was a very great speaker on, generative AI in the room, and everybody was asking each other for their comments. And I'm old enough now that somebody asked me what I thought, and I said, I think we're talking about the wrong thing. You guys are still not even emailing your customers or texting your customers yet, and you're talking about generative AI. You're killing me, Smalls, right? And so I think that no matter what size company you are, no matter how you're retooling these strategies, even the relationships with the realtor, and I love the concept of the localizedness of this, Chrissy and Brian, what are you investing in how you're communicating with people, and are we communicating with that? I mean, are we still sending mailers, guys? Because guess what? Some of us are still, you know what I mean? Like the U.S. Postal Service, maybe not the best strategy anymore, mortgage servicing world, and everyone, right? Like, how are we talking to these consumers? How are we delivering this information to them? That's what they're used to. And the big guy just made a big move to do it better.
I mean, that's really, really poignant. By the way, I got a mailer the other day for mortgage information.
There you go.
Not from my servicer, from another person trying to disintermediate me from my servicer and talk about the options that I could have. It was fascinating, but I think I only look at those because I'm in the business. If I think if I weren't in the business, it would go the way of all the other things that I get that I just throw in the trash. And by the way, email is the same way. Think about your email marketing, because today, if you use Gmail, if you use Outlook, there is a spam folder, a promotions folder, something else that those things get thrown into. And I don't know about you guys, but I literally don't go into that folder at all.
No. Only if someone says, well, I sent that to you 3 days ago. And then you're like, oh, yeah.
Go look for it. Right.
I want to shift gears a little bit, but it's not really a significant shift. This week, Kristen Messerly released her annual study. So she's been doing a study, I don't know, for at least the last 3 or 4 years on the next gen home buyer. And so her study for 2025, which is really looking back in 2024, was published this week. And I, every time she publishes it, it's like always sitting on my screen because I'm just pouring through. There was a slide in a talking point that I'm going to share with you here. So she surveys 1,000 home buyers, and these are all Gen Z and millennials. So they're next gen. And she's had this extensive, list of questions that she continued to ask, and she's added on to it, et cetera. This time around, she was specifically trying to pull at identifying trust and or distrust in the industry. And what was really interesting is that, and I'll quote this one so I don't screw it up. In one of the slides, she says, trust in financial institutions and real estate professionals is at an all-time low. With this is fascinating and scary. With trust in loan officers dropping to just 19.5%, and bank trust falling from 61.5% to 40% in 1 year, so year over year. And then there's all kinds of like sub factors around confidence in financial and home buying knowledge, yada yada yada. When she across this survey, the level of trust started with banks at 43%. 39%, which was millennials, and 43% Gen Z. Credit unions were a little bit better in both categories, and then loan officers were like 20 and 21%. And I've been trying to piece this thing together, and JD Power last year in their origination satisfaction survey talked about the difference in satisfaction when a consumer engaged with their lender loan officer much earlier in the process. Mm-hmm. And so what Kristen's data is screaming to me that in most of the cases here, I don't think it's a genuine distrust, frankly. I just don't think there's been enough done to build trust per se so that it's going to register. And it's probably because most of the time that the first time these home buyers were engaging with a loan officer was at the point of sale, the point of loan application. So really, you're almost going into it with your guard up versus had that consumer, that home buyer, been engaged with a loan advisor for 30, 60, 90 or more days, and really together they were working on that emotional and financial preparedness. that, that trust shows up a totally different way. I just find it fascinating that this particular study had that much of a stark difference year over year.
It's Brene Brown's marble jar, right? You have to put marbles into the jar to build trust. And if you don't, some of that just takes time. It doesn't happen automatically. And we've also changed our process a lot. I think about when I started, again, back in the Stone Ages, we typed applications in triplicate with carbon paper. And borrowers came in and you took an application and they dressed up and made an appointment. And there was a lot of in-person interaction over a longer period of time, because we also couldn't accept pay stubs and W-2s to verify employment. We literally had to mail out verifications of employment and verifications of deposit to their banks. So the process has shortened, which is great, right? That benefits so many people. But that means less opportunity from the time that they're ready to buy until the time that they close to build trust. Yeah. And so if you're not engaging them earlier in the process and continuing to engage them more afterwards, you haven't put a lot of marbles in that marble jar.
I got to tell you, there's an LO. He's in Southern California. His name is Corey Kavanewski. He's definitely, well, maybe he's here. Corey, if you're here, hi. He's one of the top VA lenders in the country. He reached out to me last week, and this is my example of it applies in servicing. He had a client that called him that was thinking about getting a divorce and wanted to know what the impacts were and how to manage the loan and how to manage the discussions about the divorce because of the homeownership situation that we're dealing with across the country, right? Because it's a hot button and probably a reason why people don't get divorced someday. And Corey called me and he's just like, and I was like, you got to be kidding me. You have a client that called you that is thinking about getting a divorce. And Brian, I immediately thought of you just because I watched all of your videos on LinkedIn and this concept of the advisor of, Christy, Brene Brown's marble jar here. This is somebody that trusts you enough that they know that there's going to be a housing decision that needs to be made. And they want your best advice. And of course, I responded to him as fast as I could and got him the skinny on, what's really going to happen, what to expect when you're expecting a marital meltdown. And, but it was cool to help. And it was cool to see, this is kind of not intentionally, but pulling it back to the beginning where I said, when we pull these two life cycles closer together, right, we can really, the servicing side can really help the sales side. If you see the servicing side as a valuable asset. And sometimes we just see it as a problem causer in our client relationships. But I think it's big.
That would be fascinating to kind of go back in time to Corey's relationship with that consumer, that borrower. And when did it first start? I suspect he probably was working with that client months before they bought the home and got the loan initially. Right. And so that's one of the great stories, and that's frankly what kind of keeps me excited about this business.
Yeah,
because what you just described really is not going to ever get solved in a completely digital environment. Just can't.
No, it's hard to bring heart to that unless it's generative AI heart. And we should all be talking to our inner Joyces if our technology is telling us that they love us and they want to take care of us. We should all take a pause there and make sure that that's not happening.
I had a good conversation this morning with Paul Heineman. He's one of the great thinkers in our industry, right? And he and I were talking about how well AI knows us, right? And I've said that before. I'm like, oh, my chat GPT knows me. And Paul's always quick to remind me that it only knows what I want it to know about me. And so therefore, what it knows about me is what I've told it to know about me. It doesn't necessarily know me the way you all know me. So, I think the same is true when we talk about, can AI, can a digital solution solve for every situation? Heck no, never will. And thank God we've got the Coreys of the world out there representing our industry the way he's representing it.
Well, I think AI knows you a little like a fortune teller knows you. There are certain things that they can say that you want to latch onto and feel good about. And like, it's why it's why scam artists can do some of the things that they can do, but it's why fortune tellers can tell you your future. They tell you some things that you want to hear, that you'll latch onto, and then the way that you engage with them tends to bring about those things. So it's an interesting dynamic when we think about it, because no, I don't think AI knows me, but I think it can give me some good feedback. I think it can give me some good starting points. And I think it can take care of a certain amount of repetitive transaction data that people need to know. So we think about our FAQs and the things that we have to tell people over and over again. And that's a great opportunity to insert some robotics and some artificial intelligence with a little bit of heart and soul to it. There are other places that you really need the kind of relationship and conversation that we're sitting here having. AI, I don't think will ever replace that.
Well, that's a good last word. What do you think?
I think we're running up against time, and I appreciate all the comments. I've been watching them flow through, with Mike Kelleher dropping some interesting stats, and Marianne and Kate talking about where we are with social media. Like, if you don't get a chance, dive into the comments. If you haven't already, engage with the folks that are engaging. You've got a lot of smart folks here on The Last Word, not just on the screen, but in the comments section. So please engage with everyone. Robbie does a great job of pulling this all together. We appreciate Chrisman and what they do.
Absolutely. Well, guys, we'll see you next Friday, and I think KP will be back off the slopes. Maybe we'll get lucky and have another big week of news next week to talk about.
Who's buying what? Happy Friday.
Have a great weekend.
Bye, guys. Happy St. Party's Day.
Yeah.